All right, it is 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom, and I will call the meeting to order. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, and I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, any discussion? Not hearing any, all four signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And aye for me, and any opposed? Not hearing any, that passes. Do we have any public comments on agenda items? None there. So we are swiftly passing it over to the student board member comments. And I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, so we had a pretty eventful month at the high school. We started off with our fall sports assembly. We announced all the fall sports, the players. We did some fun stuff there. And then we had our homecoming assembly and Spirit Week. And then we had homecoming a couple weeks ago. And that was a huge success. It turned out great, especially being back in the building for a dance for the first time in 2 years. It was a huge success. Lots of kids turned out. And our online ticketing system worked phenomenally.
Cool.
So that went off without a hitch, thank goodness. And we didn't have any 8th graders or anyone at the dance that wasn't supposed to be. So all in all, it was a huge success.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, so I'm in Deca, which is kind of like a little business program, or like club at the high school. And right now, so there's 3 officers. And I'm one of them, and we're doing a financial literacy project right now. And for part of that project, we're teaching classes. So who is the advisor? We're teaching his 3rd period store class when they have a break about financial literacy. So we are going to do this for we're doing it once a day for 7 weeks, so every Friday. So far, we've done 4 weeks. And it's split into sections. So we did budgeting, and then we did financial aid. So teaching about like how to apply to colleges with financial aid, like FOSFA, WASFA, and stuff like that. And then the last one is investing and saving your money. So we kind of try to set it up so we could help specifically seniors plan for after high school, and just have more of a hold on their financials. So, yeah. That's what I got for that.
Audrey, this program is for juniors and seniors, and it's at a certain time during the day, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So can they leave their classes and come and be part of the presentation, or how
Well,
does that work?
So who has store class, his 3rd period, is just like the kids who work in store. So it's not specifically seniors and juniors, but it's like anybody who's in that class. So he has freshmen all the way up to seniors. We haven't really, because we're teaching the classes for the project, because we have to write a paper about like what, if there's any payoffs to like the plan. So we haven't looked too far into like polling other students from other classes to see if they wanted to learn. But yeah, so far we've taught 4 classes, and then at the end we're going to do a total, like if anybody's gained anything from it. So. Yeah.
So, and then I think, the DECA group also works with the Chamber of Commerce to plan the Financial Reality Fair. Wow. And this year they're going to divide it up into 2 days, I just learned. So one is the financial reality part, and the other part is like speed dating job interview day. And so that kids are going to get those opportunities to try to walk around and talk to the different business people and community people and build a budget and live within that budget that they're assigned, that this is your job, this is how much you make, so now how are you going to get a house and pay your bills and everything. So they're going to do those things again with a larger number of students later in the year.
Cool.
Wow.
Okay, so next up, we're going to have a little presentation about a project by Kate Lewis, she is a junior at the high school, and she's actually heading up this project. It's called the Every 45 Minutes program. Kate?
Hello, again, my name is Kate Lewis. I am managing the Every 45 Minutes project, and I will be presenting the proposal today.
There you go. Whoops.
About us. Meet me. As a student of North Mason, I've decided to manage and lead the Every 45 Minutes project. The main reason I chose to lead this project is because I get to make a statement on the detrimental effects of driving under the influence. My goal is to assemble this project to be as realistic as possible in hopes to raise awareness of drunk driving and its negative impacts. I will also be working with Morgan Thomas. As project manager, I chose Morgan Thomas as my Every 45 Minutes assistant. Morgan is a student at North Mason High School and is on the North Mason High School Board of Directors. I chose to partner with Morgan because of his leadership skills and his ability to work well in stressful situations. The Every 45 Minutes project comes with a lot of responsibility, and I know that Morgan will be a reliable partner. Our project and strategy. Every 45 minutes in the state of Washington, someone dies from an alcohol-related collision. You may be asking, what takes place during this program? On April 20th, selected students will be hauled out of class on a stretcher every 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
While students are being hauled away, a realistic crash will be announced on the overhead speakers. The selected students will go into a room for the rest of the day with no source of communication. All sources of communication, including phones and computers, any sources of communication, will be confiscated for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, an assembly will be held at the school for students not involved in the crash. These students will watch two junkyard cars crash into each other, while the crash-selected students stage their deaths. Selected students will work with makeup stylists to make the crash seem as realistic as possible. Helicopters will potentially hover over the school and load some of the selected students away. After the assembly, selected students will continue to isolate from the rest of the school to reinforce their deaths. And then at the end of the day, selected students will stay the night in Alderbrook Resort, isolating from their friends and families.
Oh, could I volunteer for that?
Wow.
That part.
On April 21st, the most heart-wrenching part of this entire process, an assembly will be held for selected students involved in the crash. At the assembly, parents of these students will read a personal obituary.
Whoa.
Parents will share their personal reflection of their involvement with the program.
Wow.
Wow.
Conclusions. The focus of the assembly and stage crash stresses that the decision to consume alcohol while driving can affect more people than just the drunk driver and victim. These heart-wrenching events will illustrate to students the potential dangerous consequences of using alcohol while driving. It's a hand-on experience, first person. It is a traumatic program, especially for students who don't know anything about it, but this will really make a huge effect on students to not use alcohol or be under the influence while driving. Any questions? I'm sure there's probably a lot.
How did you choose
Yeah.
the kids that get to stay at the, or like go up into the helicopter
Yep.
and go to the hotel?
So part of this program is to make it as realistic as possible. In order to make it as realistic as possible, we want to really make an impact on all different kids from our school. So I decided that one car will be leadership students or well-known kids in the school, and then another car will be a car full of band kids, and our band club is very prominent in the school, so one car will be filled with band kids, another car will be filled with leadership students.
And so they are notified ahead of time and their parents know.
Yes.
It's not like a surprise.
Nope. So the parents actually have to sign consent forms before any of this can go on. Since it's so traumatic, we will be holding a meeting with all of the students and their families. And I'm working with Brandon Hagee. He works at the Central Mason Fire Department, and he will be running the meeting and notifying all parents and their students of what will be going on. Everyone will be everyone will know everything that is going on. We'll have consent forms. There's going to be a lot of signing.
Yeah. Wow.
So when the students initially, the very first thing that will happen is they will be, like you say, hauled out of their classrooms
Yes.
on a stretcher.
Mm-hmm.
But they will be aware that that's going to happen. The rest of the students in the classroom will not be aware?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have a question about that. If there, at any point in this segment of the day, is there like sort of trigger warning-esque messaging that's going to go out in case a student, has a emotional response because they've experienced this?
So in case there are any emotional responses, we will have multiple counselors on the school at all times during this program.
Do
when it
the
takes
students
place.
know that this day is happening, though? Like
They'll
know.
have an idea, but they don't know the details.
So we have done this
Right.
prior to COVID every other year. It's a
Right.
national program, and Brandon, it works really well with our community. There will be some communication. People will know about things and that it's coming, but it's still, even if you know it's going to happen, it's going to have an impact.
Yes.
And that's the intention, I know. I just
It's
want
been
to be
quite
careful.
successful.
Yeah.
And people talk about it
Yeah.
for weeks afterwards. And
It always looks
hear about
really
it. So
cool.
You know,
I'm
one
very excited
really
to hear about it.
cool positive thing to point out that we did a little research, because as you'll notice, the North Mason High School program is called the every 45 minutes program. Nationally, it's every 15
Yep.
minutes, but in Washington, there are fewer.
It dropped down recently. It used to be every 32 minutes.
Okay.
And then it dropped down again, so now it's every 45 minutes.
So there you go.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
good
teen
news.
related. That's like
Statistics.
All people.
all people
Yep,
every
all.
45 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the event. Like Kate said, we're going to pull every counselor from the upper campus. We'll be at the high school for any emotional support. And then, Alderbrook did donate these rooms. We're not paying for them, don't worry. And
That's
then
cool.
we won't have, none of the students will have contact with the outside world, but we will have a phone in case of emergencies. We'll have 2 teachers chaperoning, a male and a female. So, and then one detail, when they do get pulled out of class, you'll hear this 911 call over the radio. They'll get put on a stretcher, covered in a white blanket, and then taken out, put in an ambulance. And then the ambulance is going to drive down around and actually drop them off here at the district office.
I can already
And we'll
feel
be
it.
in the boardroom for for the
This
2
is where
days.
they'll be hanging out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
2 days?
Yes.
So we'll leave after everyone's gone from the campus. We'll hop in the van.
And do the
We'll go to Alderbrook, and then we'll come back the next morning, hang out
I
for a
see.
couple hours while they're doing the assembly, and then we'll show up and show them that we're not actually dead.
That's
So.
nice. Yeah.
Wow.
Has this been 2 days before? Has it?
This is
Okay.
the same format we have used successfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When's
And-
the last time we did this?
2018?
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to say it was 2018. My sister did it. She participated her freshman year. So, yeah, so that'd be 2018.
Yeah.
And it's Kate, right?
Yes.
How did you get selected to
So
lead
this is my first year doing leadership. I was actually voluntold by Miss Reichstein. I love these types of projects, super leadership roles. I love leading, and last year we did a Shakespearean tragedy. I led that. It was this play. We had to reenact a Shakespearean tragedy, and Miss Reichstein, she basically just chose me for the project, and I was all for it. So
You did a really great job presenting.
Thank
You have
you.
a great presence, so good
thank
job.
you so much.
I agree.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
Good job, Kate. Thanks
You're
again.
on your way.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
and then that's it for us.
All right.
Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you. Very well
Thank
done. All right, and on to the consent agenda, and I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, and any discussion? Okay, not hearing any. All for it signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye as well, and all opposed, not hearing any, that passes. And I should have been forward on that. Okay, and we're down to facilities, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do have a draft capital facilities plan in the agenda, and a copy of the flow analytics report that we described previously, or that we discussed previously this summer, that looks at our enrollment projections, because that's very important to doing capital planning. This report is not in the form of a PowerPoint. It's a draft plan. We are required, when we move towards going for a bond again, or something to do with spending money on new buildings, to have a very specific plan that follows a specific template. So this is part of that, because we're not in a place where we're asking for a bond right now. We're starting to build that information. We have recently agreed to contract with an expert in giving us the reports that we need on the state of our buildings, the square footage. There's certain things that we have to turn into OSPI years ahead of looking at something and get updated. It's called School Capital Something Planning, SCAP funding. And in order to get the money that you get to start a bond project, even before you have an election for it, you have to have completed a report and keep it up to date. So we're working on getting it up to date, so when it's time, we just have to add any new data, and the report will be ready to go, and we'll be ready to move forward. Joan, unfortunately, was not able to be here tonight because the unhealthy air quality has impacted her health, and she had to stay home. So I can answer, I know the one question that we have, that I had ahead of time from Arla about get down to the chart with the blue and yellow on it. She gave me that information in case she wasn't able to be here. She will come to the November meeting and answer any additional questions. And she also wants to tell you in detail about some of the great work that her staff is doing to support our buildings and our schools. And so we will have to do that at that point. But there was a question about the chart that...
It's further down,
It's
Jackie.
further
It's the
down.
last page. That one, yeah.
Yeah, so the question was, on this chart, what does blue mean and what does yellow mean? And so this is for those who haven't looked at it in detail, some of the maintenance that has been deferred over years when we had some finance impacts due to the levy not being passed and those things. So things that had to be done or need to be done. So the things in blue, she put in blue because those are really more grounds kinds of projects than facilities projects, so she wanted those to be separated. The things in yellow either are finished or are in the process of being finished during this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you started to answer my other question of what is SCAP funding. Is that a state?
It's a state
Bank?
requirement, yeah, and it's what they call it when, there's I forget how many steps, like, before you even get to being able to do a bond, you've gone through the first 10 steps or 9 steps. The 10th step is passing your bond, and then, we do a report, level 1, we send it to the state, they send us back number 2, we send them back number 3, and back and forth, and it goes on throughout the building process, so we continued additional numbers in that process throughout the building of these buildings on this campus and the improvements that we did as a result of the last bond.
So do we get SCAP after we get a bond?
You have to apply for it, and you
Okay.
kind of start the application before you run the bond.
Okay.
So eventually, we know we will have to.
Right.
As we look at the flow analytics report, and it predicts in the next 10 years an enrollment growth of 18.9% overall, greater at the high school level, least actually at the elementary school level. And as we look at the numbers and how they're playing out so far, we know that the first flow analytics report that we had done several years ago, up until COVID, their projections were within 1 or 2 of the actual enrollment of students that we had each year. And COVID, was an off year that we lost students. Other people did too. But with this new report, the first projection, and they gave us in that flow analytics report a high end of average, middle level, and a low end of enrollment. And we are within 5 of the high end projection for this year. So we are definitely on target with the projections that they've given us and with the information that we have about building and growth in the community. Because there's so much building and growth going on recently and in the near future, we are contracting with Flow to do another analysis this spring to see if those numbers change or if they hold true, so we really have good numbers to work with as we move forward that reflect what's happening in our community with housing growth. And so that will be a big part of the future planning process. And it's really important that we are going to need, and we talked about it a little bit later tonight in my report, but we are going to need to bring together our facilities committee. They will be part of working with our consultant on evaluating the state of the buildings and the future needs and bringing a report to the board to move us forward in the process as we move along. But it's really important that we have a lot of community members involved in that discussion, because we do know that we're growing and the district's growing, and we're not going to fit into the facilities we have before you know it. And so we have to be ready with plans to adjust to that.
Very nice. Okay. So then we are, I went too far down. I'm sorry.
Number 4.
Yes, and now we're back down here. Okay, inclusive education presentation, number 4.
And
These two are together, actually, number 4 and number 5.
Oh, okay.
We decided to do
And
a
the
team.
22-23 district success plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I just want to introduce us as your teaching and learning team with Dana and our building administrators. I'm Lisa Roberts, I'm the assistant superintendent, and this is Kyle Ellis, and he's our director of inclusive practices. And this is Amber Nygaard, and she's our assistant director of inclusive practices. And it didn't really make any sense to have them have a separate presentation than the district success plan, because it's all one big thing right here. So we're going to do this together. And am I standing close enough to make the sound?
I hear you just fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. All right. So the first few slides here are the part of this is for you. You guys got 2 documents. You got a big, long Word document that was the district success plan that has a lot more detail on it. But we were also asked to produce something that could be more accessible to the public, that we could put on the website and all of that. So that's what this PowerPoint is about. And I cannot talk without moving my hands, so hopefully that is not distracting to everybody. I'll try to hold on to this. The first 2 slides, the district and the mission and the vision, you guys have seen. You might notice on our vision statement, we have changed it slightly from some past years to really put front and center the terms equitable and the terms inclusive. I know you guys are going to be working on your strategic plan. This can be a starting place for you, but just letting you know that we really are trying to make, if our primary goal is to meet the needs of every single one of our students, that's equitable and inclusive, we know that we have to have systems in place that are going to help us do that. Those of you who've been around for a while know that we started our MTSS work back in about 2017, 2018. And one thing we realized is that we had way too many initiatives going on. And we had to find a way to braid them so we didn't feel like we were overwhelming the system in every way. And this is when we came up with the logo that you see now with the whole child, the whole school, and the whole community. But these are kind of the categories under which we said, this is the things that we're doing in our schools, this is how we can put them together. For the whole child, we want to make sure that kids are academically engaged, that we needed to make sure that we were teaching behavior competencies, and this is when we really started to have the big push on social emotional health. If you've been around in our system for a while, you know that we discovered back in about 2017-18, if we can't take care of kids' social emotional needs and their behavior needs, we'll never get to our academic goals. And because our kids don't come in with academic needs separate from their behavior, separate from their social emotional, they are one person coming into our school. And for a whole school, it's all about systems. And then wellness for all, including all the adults in the system. And then how do we create a culture of learning in all of our buildings? And then from Deanna, I know you've been hearing a lot about whole community. How do we increase our communication with our community members? How do we get more family engagement? You know that we've had hires in the last couple of years to help us with that goal of increasing our family engagement. And then again, the education and the awareness piece.
All right, good evening, board. I'm really excited to be here today to talk with you. I want to do a quick aside that every 45-minute project, I'm really excited to see that as a participant back in high school, at every 15-minute project. I was convinced before that it saves lives, so now it's great to have some data that it's now in every 45-minute project. That is really cool to hear, so I'm excited for this team and what they plan on doing with that. All right. Now on to my piece. So the first part, strengthen systems for learning, targeted planning for school improvement through the needs assessment process. We have always done a needs assessment process, and we started that off in August, kind of looking through it with our administrators and our built team members, and we're looking at all these different pieces that go on with the school. We just completed a McKinney-Vento needs assessment, which is for students experiencing homelessness, and coming up with plans for that. We'll be doing a Title I needs assessment. We do all sorts of needs assessment, and that's really built into what we're doing for the strategic planning. Implement MTSS, so multi-tiered systems of support, expanding strength in the key components: leadership, data-informed decision-making, school, family, community partnerships, and layered supports, evidence-based practices. And the last piece that is up on this slide, engage all instructional administrators in improved Tier 1 commitments, which include implementation of universal design for learning and inclusionary practices. I know that, board, you're participating in the IPP project online right now. I don't know if that's completed for the board piece, but I think it already has. As a team, we're participating in the IPP project, and I know that some data was shared probably 2 board meetings ago that showed least restrictive environment, and that's how Washington State looks at the IPP project. As a district, we were at 77% of our special needs students were attending 80% or more in the gen ed setting, and that's how Washington State is really looking at inclusionary practices. We do have some, and that was for last year, we do have some preliminary data coming back, and we're closer to that 80% of our special needs students are going to be included 80% or more in the gen ed setting. So those are big wins for us when we're looking at inclusionary practices. We're, as a team, looking at every student's IEP, and it's really about what each individual kid needs. Hopefully throughout this, I'm talking about special needs students, but really we're talking about all kids. We need to know as a team and as a school, as principals, as teachers, what every single kid needs. And so that's really when we're talking universal design for learning, and we're talking about inclusionary practice, what each kid needs. All right, strengthen culture for learning. Implement non-negotiables and blueprints for academic, social, emotional, and behavioral expectations and supports. You'll hear Amber talk a little bit more about those pieces when we're talking about our blueprints and MTSS. Train staff on Tier 2 and 3 academic, social, emotional, and behavior supports. Our staff right now, and when I was talking about with what every kid needs, when you walk through our schools, right now, most of our grades are really starting to implement what we call win time. Has everybody here heard of win time? So the what I need time. It used to be called RTI, response to intervention. We're really pushing, looking at data and getting kids all those, by looking at the data based upon our assessments that we're using, exactly what each skill the kids needs and each kid needs. And so soon, I think some grade levels are already starting with this. And I know the middle school, I believe, is already starting with this. You're going to see these interventions and supports in action. We'll increase family engagement activities and ensure required training for paraprofessionals. There's already been a start. You've all experienced the picnic that kicked off the year for some family engagement, some community engagement activities. I know that schools have either done or are planning some Title I family engagement nights, which is great. That's an excellent opportunity to bring families in. We haven't been able to do that for a couple years, and so this is a great way that families can come and engage with teachers, staff, anybody that's in that school community. I do know those are coming up really soon. And create a robust early learning center, which includes developmental preschool, transitional kindergarten, TK, partnership with ECAP, and child care facilities. So right now, we have 36 students in the transitional kindergarten program. So that's 2 full classrooms of students that are 4 years old attending full-day school with certificated staff members. That's amazing that we have this many kids in our community that are coming to our school full-time. I think last year started with 1 and eventually got 2. We were able to fill those 2 classes up very quickly for our buildings. And developmental preschool started small, but each week it seems like we're adding to our developmental preschool. So that's where we see more of our special needs students and getting what they need in that developmental preschool setting. In our partnership with ECAP, we'll see those. We do monthly meetings for early learning leadership team, and we're really looking at how to integrate our ECAP students and our developmental preschool students together more and really work on our inclusionary practices at the preschool level as well. All right, so we have a lot of acronyms up here, so I'll try to explain them the best I can. So first is utilize AVID 612, GLAD, and UDL P12. So AVID is, I've worked in AVID districts, so advancement via individual
Determination.
Thank you, determination. So right now it's 612. We're looking at ways that we can start using some of those strategies at all grade levels, because what we're finding is that AVID and GLAD, there's a lot of meshing between the two. And GLAD is Guided Language Acquisition Design, and I got that one. And that's where most of my background comes is with the GLAD. So this program is really instructional practices that we train teachers on that support all learners. It started in the early 90s, late 80s in California, and it was really a program that was geared towards English language learners. But what was found was that this supports all kids. And this is when we think UDL, Universal Design for Learning, supporting all kids. GLAD is a huge piece for that. It makes the learning visible for all kids. It has structures of differentiation for all students. These are strategies that all teachers for at least K-5 are working on towards being trained or have been trained in. We have a big cohort of kids teachers that are being trained right now.
Interjecting really quickly, we were hot and heavy into training GLAD. We had, at one time we had 4 different trainers here in the district. We had 2 who are still here. COVID happened. It's a hard program to do the professional development when you can't be in person. And so after those 2 years of not being able to do anything, we had 35 people show interest and wanted to do it this year. Nice. And so they're being trained, and then our facilitators are working with them to do some live support.
Nice.
Yeah. And so next, create a robust remote learning environment, including strengthening ALE with the addition of STEAM courses and evening sessions. And we say create, but a lot of this is already happening. I'm excited for Lexi from James Taylor and HomeLink to be presenting. I believe she's doing next month with the school improvement plan. There has been some amazing things already happening at those two programs, and I'm excited for her to share a lot more what she's doing with the alternative learning environment and her STEAM within that school. And then when we talk about STEAM courses, that includes all K-12 as well. Establish academic screening and monitoring tools in grades K-8. I say that those are established and underway right now. We use FastBridge as our main academic screening tool. And right now we're using we have some Panorama, social emotional pieces that are coming out, and Sabres is also part of FastBridge for some of our social emotional screening. And then we'll monitor student credit acquisition, regular attendance, and create tiered supports. I had a great talk with the principal of the high school about some credit acquisition plans that we are going to try to utilize some of our funding that we have through grants to help with some of our kids that are, especially those ones that we're thinking about that are close to passing courses. What are some creative ways starting in second term that we can get these kids so that we can maybe get a couple credits within one class during those credit acquisition processes?
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the blueprint commitments. I've been lucky enough to be with the district long enough that when we started our MTSS, multi-tiered systems of supports development, that I've been able to contribute to that and participate in it. Every building's in a different space right now with the development of their blueprints, and that's encouraged by the implementation science of not just demanding that everybody does this at the same time and be lockstep. It has to be developed with the buy-in with the staff, with the proper training of meeting them where they're at. And then, so when we're developing blueprints, we're developing a plan that if somebody were to leave, that we have a plan that's sustainable. If any new staff comes in, we can hand them this blueprint and they understand the systems and procedures of not just that building, but also we have a district MTSS blueprint as well. So we're kind of in the process of a revival of those. We had some great momentum in multiple different buildings and evidence of that having impact on students. Again, we had to, because we had some plans in place when we had to pivot with COVID coming through, we had a base plan that we could work from and then alter it to meet the needs of our students. So now I'm working with all of the buildings on reviewing our plans, ensuring that those are actions that we can actually do. Ultimately, the buildings create their commitments. These are non-negotiables, and this is what we do as far as academics, behavior, and social emotional learning. Those commitments and blueprints also go down to what staff will do, what students will do, what parents will do, and what administrators will do as well. So we're seeking feedback on the input on the other roles, not just what staff is going to do. We want the onus on the students and the community as well on what we are committed to for our students. Our academic commitments right now, these are just a few that are through buildings. Everybody commits to teaching core programs and or standards with Fidelity. So having them have the proper professional development and opportunity to dig into those standards and understand what is being asked to be done with our instructional practices and our UDL learning. We're having the firm goals and flexible means because not every student is going to learn in the exact same manner, and we need to make sure that we're flexible, but always using the standards to guide us. We're implementing non-negotiable instructional strategies. So when Kyle's talking about GLAD or AVID, during walkthroughs, when administration or people from the district or other teachers are walking into classrooms, is that evidenced in what you're experiencing? Is everybody doing the non-negotiable strategies? I've been in 2 buildings thus far, and I'm on the schedules for others to do what we call a tiered fidelity inventory, and that is to do an evaluation on the building and their blueprints and their commitment to those with the tier 1 levels of supports. And buildings are looking really good. We would have expected, because every transition right now and every building has new administrative teams, and some buildings have many more new staff members than others. We expect a little bit of a drop, but that's not viewed in a negative manner from the buildings that see one category where they may have scored lower than in the past, because it gives them an action step. They know what they need to do then to further implement their system. We conduct, report, and use a variety of agreed upon assessment tools. We use screeners for all students, and then it allows us to know what diagnostic assessments we need to step into next. All teachers have that commitment that they will do progress monitoring, and we're setting up our system if a student needs access to a tier 2 or a tier 3 support, that there has been progress monitoring. There is data and evidence of what strategies have we tried, what is working, what is not working, so we can fine tune it to the specific skills that we need to intervene on. And then we do summative end of the year smarter balance assessments, and that helps guide us to our needs assessments that we do. Is our system working? Do we look good on paper? And are we getting the student outcomes that we want, which is always what we're working on. We used evidence-based evaluative tools. We have Danielson Framework for Teaching for our certificated staff. We have WASA, which is district administrators, and we have AWSP, which is an evaluative tool for our principals. We also partner with them in order to increase everybody's capacity and continue to be learners as well. Pbis is something when we started talking about braiding those initiatives, when Lisa was talking about that years ago, we worked with a gentleman named Greg Benner, and he came and helped us do that process. But Pbis is Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, and this is under the umbrella of MTSS. And so in a positive manner, we are teaching explicitly what our school-wide expectations are, how are we reinforcing the appropriate behavior, and how are we responding to inappropriate behavior. So in those blueprints in every building, they have a plan on how do we respond to inappropriate or unexpected behavior. How are we reinforcing and celebrating the students doing as they've been asked to do, and are they very clear in what those expectations are in all different environments throughout the district. This goes also into the classroom, because when we talk about those commitments, some of those commitments are teaching. And so the teachers, are they teaching those expectations, routines, and procedures? Are we reteaching as we see, making sure that we're proactive and not reactive in that? When we start to see data that's showing we need to reteach, then we schedule that and plan it and make sure that it's reminded all the time. We don't want to practice under the assumption is, well, we've told them once. Everybody should know. We all need reminders on different things. So even in the classroom, how does different levels of reinforcement happen? And then teachers are, one of their commitments is, if we have inappropriate or unexpected behavior, you will know when I shoot you a look, or I give you a nonverbal cue, or I come and stand by you, that's my first step in helping you remember that we need to maybe change our behavior or engage in our learning. So every building, like I said, is at different points on this. We're excited that all of our main campuses right now are on SWIS, which is a database where we collect all of our behavior data, our school psychs, our SPED teachers, our multilingual teachers, and all of our administrators have access to that, so we can pull the data on every student. We can look at the big picture. We can break it down by hour, by behavior, by what responses to that behavior were effective or ineffective, and even down to the finite of which staff members. And that will help us identify that maybe it's not a student area that we need to support. We may need to support that whole classroom. So that data is really valuable to us. So that's a win that we have all buildings using that. Social emotional learning, like Lisa mentioned, we started with the behavior and social emotional. I mean, just listening to our staff at the time is, if we can't get this manageable and meet their needs, we can't do the academics. But I think we're at the point where we have some really quality systems in place for behavior in SEL. And now we need to get the instruction and the academics moving in the right direction. So we're finding a balance that it does now need to be 3 prongs to that stool. We use the CASEL approach to teaching SEL, and I don't know what CASEL stands for, to be perfectly honest. Anybody? It's a National Social Emotional program that we utilize. We adopted for K-12, not P-12, K-12 Character Strong. The high school and secondary, the high school had Character Strong already, but now all buildings are using it. In the past we've used Second Step for that explicit instruction on SEL, and now we're using Character Strong. So if you see any of the posts from the different schools acknowledging that, they have a monthly characteristic that they are focusing on. We're teaching about it. We're teaching the students how to respond to it and how to apply it in all different areas of their life. And then we're promoting and celebrating those via Student of the Month, public posts, certificates and highlights in the classes. We're starting to see some really cute projects, especially at the elementary, over the characteristic of the month. How is the classroom creating a project that they all contribute to? And I think this month was responsibility. So what does responsibility look like for them?
So CASEL is collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning.
I just
So it's an
found that too.
institution?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so those are standards per se
I gotcha.
that we follow for social emotional. And we model that. So on this slide, we have that explicit teaching of SEL. Again, we don't want to work under the assumption that kids should come in knowing this. Also, that adults need to know this. So when we're addressing students, we're also addressing adult behavior. Teacher SEL instructional practices. It's not everyone's forte to teach the touchy-feely stuff, but it needs to be because the students need to know that they're cared for and that they're working on this together. We're integrating it to academic curriculum. Most grade levels have a crosswalk between the CASEL and SEL standards and their academic standards, and how when they're doing a guided reading in one class, can that be literature that matches the SEL trait or character that we're working on. And then organizational, climate, and cultural strategies. So in that inclusivity and equitability, how are we meeting the needs and meeting all of the students where they're at, learning about them, and learning how to respond and work with them.
Wow.
This is where the glasses come in handy. Okay, so when you saw the more detailed of the district success plan, there were a lot more indicators. And Arla, you had asked that in terms of the measurables, where do the measurables come from? And we work kind of back and forth with the schools. They have their own school success plan that they're going to be giving you a part of it next week. But it's using a template that comes from the Office of School Systems and School Improvement. And we create those, we look at them twice a year. We create them in the fall, we look at them winter, we look at them end of the year. And then we also built in where are we every quarterly going to be looking at their different indicators as far as success. So they create their goals, and then they start to create what's the evidence that we're going to collect that supports our goals. At the classroom level, they look at data even more frequently than that. That's about every 6 weeks that we built it into the collaboration schedule, that they get together and they look at all their data together. So this is just a few of the things that we are looking at. But again, we're trying to look at data in all areas. So we're trying to look at academic data. When you see SABRES, that's our screener for social emotional learning. In terms of behaviors, mentioned SWIS, that's all going to be the office discipline referrals will be in SWIS. We're also really looking at attendance. We actually have a grant around attendance and re-engagement this year because that has been a problem, as you well know, for the last couple of years. So what are we doing to increase attendance? If you were to walk into any of our elementary schools right now, you would see right when you come in, we have 93% of our kids here right now. We have 95% of our kids, because what they're trying to do is to really celebrate, are we getting most of our kids here at school? Because there's a quote recently that said, school is one of those must be present to play. If you're not at school, how are you going to be successful? The other thing we are trying to reestablish now is going into classrooms and get classroom evidence. What's occurring for all of our kids? And are there conversations that we have? Are they getting access to the grade level standards with the rigor they need to have that? It was hard to walk through classrooms the last few years. And so now it's being reestablished again. And again, we're trying to flip that little tiered system so that the majority of our kids are doing fine with Tier 1 supports. We're seeing that in SEL and behavior. We're still working towards that when it comes to academics. Some of the positive trends, this one you might have to move just a little bit. So one of the things we're looking at attendance was, last year, if you will recall, at the beginning of the year, we had if you were around anybody who had COVID, you might have to be quarantined. Most of our younger students had not received any vaccines yet, and so our attendance rate was abysmal. So when we looked at it at the beginning of the year, and then last year by the end of the year, only about 55% of our kids were meeting that mark of being here at 95% or more. So even right now, and as you know, at the beginning of the year, a few number of absences can really skew your percentage because we haven't been in school that long, but we're up even at this point to 71% of our kids are here 95% or better. So we're having kids coming back to school and coming regularly, which is great. There are way fewer students receiving office discipline referrals compared to the same time last year. That in K-8, we actually saw that there was no dip from spring to fall, which is unusual. Usually you'll see that summer dip, and we really haven't seen it, so we're hoping that's giving us good news. And then in terms of our social emotional screening, this is actually pretty consistent, but only about 69% of our students are
At low risk.
at low risk as self-reported, which is usually more accurate.
How do they self-report or?
There's two parts of the Sabres, and basically, they're going to ask them a series of questions, and the kids can take it, and so in grades 4 through 12, we have the kids do that. It's called My Sabres. And then a similar set of questions the teachers answer. And so sometimes it's really interesting to see the difference between the two. How are they perceiving, how does the teacher perceive them, and what is the kid's self-reporting?
And just to jump in there, it's super important because the My Sabres helps us identify students that are internalizing behaviors and the way they feel. And that's a real aha for the adults that are working with them. They might appear to be very well adjusted, but they are not feeling that way.
Yeah, it shows, it actually will give you both. It'll say usually you know the ones who are externalizing behaviors because they're acting out all over the place, right? But it's the internalizing behaviors, I'm depressed, I'm all of that kind of stuff that you might not know unless you dig a little deeper. Okay. So on this right here, I'm not going to go into detail on this, but you need to go to the next slide because that's, okay. When you saw this, this was back when Beth Bork was here, but we had, you guys went to the thing on implementation science, so you know that this implementation does not happen overnight. It takes a while. And we had just those couple of years in there in which COVID and the double levy failure didn't help us move forward very quickly. But when you look through this, they have it for 3 different things. First of all, our district MTSS team really is our admin team. And then when they go to the next one, it's going to be the building level MTS teams, and then the Tier 2, Tier 3 teams. And what we're hoping to do, I will give us a little nod here. We were asked by the ESD to present at the MTSS directors meeting on Wednesday about our progress, tell the North Mason story, because we're way farther ahead than other districts around us. And so we got a lot of kudos from that.
Nice.
So it felt good.
Where did you say that was?
That was at the ESD.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just evident that we followed the science. We stayed the course. We didn't introduce a new initiative and
Yeah.
switch. We have
that's
stuck with
huge.
this.
And part of it is, I know you've seen the graphic of MTSS, but it's a lot of systems work. And we spent a lot of time on those systems so that even during the COVID years, we had a problem-solving model. That we just didn't know we were going to be solving those problems during those years.
Right.
You know, but we had a model in place. They used the blueprints, the commitments, and they'd start putting in a different color font, okay, this is what this is going to look like during COVID this year. But they were still there, and it gave them somebody called it, and when you think of the blueprint, it's like a marching orders, or it's your playbook if you want a sports analogy. But we had those pieces in places. I think this year and last year, kudos to all of the buildings for changing their master schedules to provide more supports for all of our kids. And in doing so, they did that when there was a lot of other things going on that was creating stress in everybody's life, but it's a commitment to our kids need more support, and how are we going to do it? And how are we going to do it with the staff that we have?
So who are in the Tier 2 and 3 teams?
The Tier 2 and Tier 3 teams, and you can answer this better than I am.
Every building has established Tier 2 and 3. Those meetings meet most often during the day. So the process is a student or the data has referred somebody to needing more support. So on the teams in each building is their administrators, their counselors. We invite in school psych. If it has to do with a student that has or may potentially need or benefit from an IEP, we invite one of the case managers into that. And then if it's for support for a particular student, we'll also schedule a meeting with them. So we get those referrals, and then we look at data. We look at what assessments and screeners, what does the data look like, what progress monitoring and strategies have already been attempted, and how has the student responded to those. Doing fidelity checks to make sure that the interventions have been happening in the way that they're intended to. So that team gets together, and the buildings look at attendance data, they look at that Sabres data, they look at discipline data and academic data, so the whole child. So we're looking at the full picture of that individual child and having discussions on what is our next step in trying to support the child. So then we have a very clear support and stepping system to get them introduced.
And
Tier
that
2
group is the same, tier 2, tier 3, it's the same group of people.
Right now it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And we kind of go to some of the outside resources when we start introducing more of tier 3 interventions. And that's when we're
Okay.
partnering with community and
I see.
different, so that we're doing the problem solving and planning with that team. And then from there, using that as a platform on what other supports do we need to pull in.
And as most of you know, this is a process that is going to be required by all school districts for identification for special ed in the next few years. So getting it in place now will help our staff to think about differently, because you're going to have to answer the question, what have you tried? Did it work? Did it not work?
And how is that tier 2/3 team? It's a lot of the same players as the school MTSS teams, I then gather, like almost.
The school MTSS teams is their building leadership teams. So it's representation from all the different grade levels and the different programs. High school, it would be their department groups,
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're built leadership teams.
which also includes counselor and administrators.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah,
So can I back up a little bit to the Sabres
absolutely.
self-assessment? Do you feel that the students, you mentioned those are students who internalize so much and that kind of comes out in that assessment to you? Do you feel like that's a real honest, I guess, response from those students, or are they, do they feel comfortable
Being
telling
honest.
those stories or telling how they feel in that forum?
And we can all jump in here, but I would say that, first of all, you would never, ever use just one measure to determine if kids need additional supports. And a screener is just supposed to be a risk indicator, you know? Do we have somebody who's showing that possibly something could be going on for them? And then you would need other data pieces to determine,
Yeah.
are they going to need additional supports or not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have had teachers say that when, just at the elementary level, like, because they're doing it amongst their peers, some of them may not take it seriously. And that's where the contradiction between what the teacher scores on a SABRE versus what the student
I
does.
see.
But we're really working with the adults to not challenge the data, but to respond to the data.
Okay.
So even if they are not taking it seriously, we do go into further investigation, pull them privately, do further, get further information from them to ensure that it's accurate and representative.
Okay.
Because that would be even true with your reading and your math screeners. You would never take that just one score. What if it was a bad day? You know, and so you
Right.
have to look at, are there other indicators that are saying here's a student who needs additional supports?
And just like our academic assessments, these are done 3 times a year as
Yeah.
well. So I think, you know, you may not see it on the first round, but as the kids are getting used to taking this assessment, we would expect to see more and more of the whole picture
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Relatedly, I had a question about I think you called it Swiss, Amber. So, and that would be, I imagine, another piece of that puzzle. So is that data taking, so this is the thing you mentioned about it tracks behaviors. So the onus is on the teacher, like who is inputting the behaviors?
So when teachers and administrators, anyone working with the students, put in an office discipline referral into Skyward, that gets pulled over into Swiss.
Okay.
So then
That's how that's tracking that.
And then
Okay.
at least once a month with a couple of the buildings that I'm aware of, they pull up that data and look at it with their built-in leadership team to say where are the behaviors, how can we provide support? Maybe it's an incentive that month to be on time to class. Maybe it's we're seeing that we have a huge problem with defiance in the classroom, so we go through our problem-solving model. Okay, we need to teach about it, teach our expectations, celebrate it when we're seeing, and respond to it if we're not seeing a change of that. So from Skyward for the office discipline referrals to Swiss. The other tier, like a tier 3 intervention as a response to Swiss, is where we do programs like check-in, check-out, or breaks or better. So maybe teachers are asked to input what the motivation of the behavior or perceived motivation was. Are we avoiding a task? Are we avoiding a person? Are we trying to obtain an item? Are we trying to obtain adult or peer attention? So when we start to then dig in and drill down to that child, we try to meet their needs that they're exhibiting with those behaviors. So maybe they need more adult interaction. We find a mentor that they trust and that gives time. They go check in with them. They build goals with them. They motivate them and go through a tracking system in that to try to meet the needs and show that they don't have to exhibit the behavior in order to get their needs met.
The other thing I'd add to that is that we actually have several data management systems, but one of them that we just trained all of our staff on is called Panorama. Have you introduced that to you guys before? Okay, so Panorama, it is a one-place thing that you can look at your students and you can see their academic, their behavior, and their social emotional data. Is kind of like a dashboard.
Yeah.
But in the same platform, we can collect a perceptual survey from our parents, from our staff, and for our students as well, so that we can put various types of data into one place so that we can make better decisions using the data that we have and not having to pull from all kinds of different places.
So these programs that you're talking about, these applications all speak to each other?
And not as well as we'd like all the time, but yes, they all pull from Skyward. I mean,
Okay.
that's the one thing they all have in common, and so it's only as good as what you put in, but
Okay.
our Cedars and our Skyward that we have to do for everything for the state, they all pull from there.
Okay.
But some of them don't want to talk to others, and they're
We know-
proprietary things, so that's why we use multiple ones.
Okay.
And Swiss gives us a lot, the word would be like prettier information, so we can really kind of chart and track some of these trends, and we can make school-wide decisions from this. We can take it to those tier 2 meetings and make individual kid decisions as well using the Swiss
Okay.
information system.
Okay.
How do you feel the students are receiving this information? And maybe this is a better question for you two. Do you feel like there is a noticeable, like people are feeling a culture shift, or they're seeing this more? I don't know if you've gotten any much feedback.
And I'd love to hear you guys, but I'm going to tell you, first of all, K-8 and 9-12 are completely different beasts.
Totally.
Okay,
I'm
so
sure.
we just have to understand that completely. So a lot of the things we're talking about, there's a lot more data K-8, because the 9-12, the goal is to graduate, right? So a lot of the things that you're tracking at high school aren't these. It's do you have your credits? What do what's the failure rate? What's the grade distribution? All of that kind of stuff is more of the data they're tracking, and the interventions at the high school level are how are we going to get you to graduation? So.
Yeah, that pretty much there's at the high school where as far as the emotional stuff goes, I haven't noticed a difference, but this year and last year especially, they're getting better at, okay, we're sitting down with our counselors more, making plans for graduation. We're sitting down with our graduation specialist more and making a plan. And Mr. Mosby, our career counselor, I forgot his title. But we sit down with all three of these people and we lay out a plan of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
As far as, at least from my perspective, as far as the social emotional goes, I think the My Savers is actually like really effective. As someone who's taken it, I think the questions are not I think they're good for the student. Like they're not confrontational, I guess, not hard to answer, because it's usually a yes, no, sometimes that type of thing. So I think that's important. I know as I attended the high school last year full-time, and now I'm doing full-time running START. It's a little bit different because I don't go to homeroom, so I don't, I'm not pulled in to take the quizzes, so I don't know, I guess, how the culture of that is right now. But as far as graduation, I actually just read the senior bulletin, and it was really thorough and really well put together. So as far as that goes, I was impressed because it had everything that I need to know, and I didn't go to the meeting because I had class, because I'm at a totally different schedule. So as far as that goes, I think that was really good.
Thank you for sharing.
And Arla, back to you. We are going to do some perceptual data from the students this November,
okay.
and so we'll have Dana share that with you too.
Cool. I think I had another thought randomly, but I don't know if I'm gonna remember it. Oh, you had mentioned before, so, in terms of reviewing progress, and all the different meetings that you guys will have, and you mentioned you'll have 4 scheduled administrative meetings to review the data across the district to measure progress toward goals and changes needed. And then I was just curious, that obviously gets communicated to you, and then do we get reports on? after
Yeah,
those 4
usually,
meetings?
when we have those, I forget which one of our ERs it is, but we would report some of that data in that report.
Okay.
But also probably as part of an abbreviated version and just as a status report during our
Yeah.
teaching
I'd
and
be
learning
curious to
conversations.
Hear the updates as they, like, real time, as after they've met, and
Yeah.
to know how well the plan is doing throughout the year.
The other thing is to share the mid-year reports that they do on their consolidated school improvement plans. Because then they'll go through and they'll give a narrative of how they are doing in terms of all their goals and the data that supports that.
And that comes in the late winter.
Thank you.
And then again in June. They can't leave for the summer till later.
You guys are doing really good work.
Yeah, this is the stuff that they don't get to, like, parents don't get to see,
No, it's
and that
so
they're
hard
like,
to
well, what are they
communicate.
doing about it? Well, I couldn't even explain it, like, are you kidding me?
I know, I wish
But if
I-
you come to sit in one of the, go back to this date and watch her, that, and see all this, it's amazing. And it doesn't, were they doing this back in the 80s and the 90s? Like, that's
No,
like
not
what
this
every time we ask
particularly,
questions
no.
and parents would ask questions, my mom would ask questions. This isn't what was going on, so it has definitely come very far, and you guys are doing an amazing job. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you staying and giving your report.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. And then, and down here to the board development and linkage for the superintendent update and budget status update.
Yep, so Dan's up next.
All right.
And you did Dan's dashboard data, did do some work on it over the weekend, so you have an updated one in your packet, that if you didn't see it earlier today from what you saw previously.
It's what's uploaded online?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just follow along.
Yeah, good evening, good evening. That was really a great presentation. As I sat there and listened, I'm just so excited about how far we've come. I think back to when we had Dr. Benner here and we started out on this journey, and here we are, as they shared, we've stuck with the plan and we are hitting those milestones. So it's pretty exciting. So I'm here to talk to you about the budget status, and for those who might be watching this recording or watching live, I'm Dan King. I'm the Director of Business and Finance. I'd like to start with so there's 5 funds that we manage, and the general fund is the main one that we go really into more detail with when I give these budget status reports. But this one right here, this first document, gives us the fund balances for our other 4 funds. So we're just starting out the fiscal year. It's September. This budget status report is through the month of September, our first month of the fiscal year. And so even though we might have some changes in our financial status since September 30th, I'm presenting up through September 30th. So our fund balance in our capital projects fund at the end of September was $402,000. Our debt service fund balance was $2,325,882. Our ASB fund balance was $445,632, and our transportation vehicle fund ending balance at the end of September was $505,429. So also on this part of the report, I'd like to share about our enrollment. And again, we're just starting out the year, and although our budget status is really looking at September 1 through 30, this also includes our October enrollment, because we do our enrollment at the beginning of each month. So you can see here what our budgeted enrollment was for the year is 2,260 students. And that's how we're funded. We're funded based on what we budgeted until, from September through December. And then adjustments to our apportionment are made in January based on the actual numbers. So, and then we don't get the same percentage each month either. It's different. We get 100% of the enrollment across the year, but it's different percentages each month. And I'll go into that when we go into the next part to show you our trend line.
What
But-
accounts for the October enrollment
It's
bump?
running star.
There's
Running-
actually several things.
Yeah, that's a really good
Starts
question,
with-
Arla.
Yes, it
So
is.
you can see there the increase in our enrollment between September and October. So really, there's two main causations for that. One is this includes Running Start, about 60 students. They don't start until October, so they weren't counted in September. And then our kindergarten enrollment has increased. And I think that's the transitional kindergarten program. They start a little bit later than the rest of the students. So that's about 40 kids right there. There were some other increases across the other grade levels. So what you're seeing there is a difference of 134 students between September and October. If we subtract 60 from that, the rest really is our K-12 enrollment increase. So that's good news to see. Because, our apportionment is based on the enrollment and also what we budgeted for. We don't want to come in under what we budgeted for, and we are over what we budgeted for, so that's good news. So moving on to the general fund, starting with our revenues. And here's where I made some adjustments. I made adjustments with the revenues and the expenditures because as I was examining the reports, this dashboard, which comes through our Forecast 5 software, wasn't matching what I was getting out of our Skyward reports. And so I did a deep dive in it. I worked with our representative with Forecast 5, and we found a couple things and made some adjustments. And what I'm learning too, Forecast 5 is a tool. It's a tool that helps us make forecasts. It's a tool that helps us present our data, our budgetary data in different ways and do data mining. And I learned that Forecast 5 is coming to Washington State in December to do some training. So I'm looking forward to participating in that so that I can learn how to use this tool better to not only make projections, but also to make adjustments so that we're being strategic about our budget as the year goes on. I consider the month of September, we don't really have a lot of trend data. We're just starting out. So the numbers really in this dashboard, I would consider kind of soft numbers. It ain't, anyway, even though I did make some adjustments to bring them truer to where we actually are. So at the top, on the top left, you can see that radial dial. It has our actual revenues to date. We've collected about 6.63% of what we had projected. And we've collected 6.63 of our budgeted revenues. We had projected that we'd be at 6.51 at this point in time. So a little bit more than we had projected. And then it's broken down the next through radio dials to local, state, and federal sources. So you can see that our local sources, we're at 1.66% of our budgeted revenues. We projected that our local sources would be at 2.08% at this time. Our state, we're at 8.49. We had projected that our year-to-date state revenues would be 8.49, so we're right on the money there. And then our federal sources, we're at 0.62, and we had projected we'd be at 0.52. And that's really, I think, expected because a lot of this is some federal programs and grants that we're haven't made that transition yet into the new fiscal year. And I do have to say, we're still in the process of our year-end closing, and that'll be completed next week. And after we do the year-end, during the process, we're doing adjustments still. We're doing a lot of adjustments and just making sure we're balancing the books correctly. And so that also could have an influence on where we are and how we're going to look, when we come back next month and look at our budget status. Back to the revenue page, the top 10 sources of revenue. Our apportionment usually is always our top, and that's based on student enrollment. You can see there of note the local property taxes. In September, we collected about $50,000. And so, that's just a portion of the $3.8 million that, well, the local sources in property taxes is about $3.8 million for the year. And then there are some other local sources as well, like we get money from fees and textbooks, fees and things like that, or rebates on our communications. It's called E-rate. So there are some other sources that we call local sources as well besides property tax. On the right side, you can see the bars. That compares our revenues by source, prior year to date versus current year to date. So we can compare last September to this September. And so you can see there where, again, the majority of our revenues are coming in through state, and you can see that difference between this year and last year and years prior. Let's go on to the expenditure page, please. And here's where there was a significant adjustment because the projected year-end balance was a lower number than this, a lower percentage. Our goal is to be at 8% for our fund balance, and as I mentioned, as we're collecting, doing more of our year-end closing and finishing closing the books, and as our enrollment changes, we're hoping to see that change. But we're not far off right here. Our total expenditures year to date are at 7.45% of our budget, and we had projected that we'd be at 8.82. So the spending's a little bit lower than we had expected or projected. For salaries and benefits, our actual year-to-date expenditures are 7.6% of our budgeted, and we had projected that we'd be at 7.87, and our basic ed is at 7.41, and we had projected 9.78. Our top 10 expenditures are, again, really those big buckets are basic education, district-wide support, special education, ALE, alternative learning experiences. On the right, you can see some more bar graphs showing expenditures by object, comparing last September to this September. You can see there are some changes, some differences in salaries. And I think that is to be expected. There have been some adjustments that the state has made for teachers across the state. And you can see benefits there as well as, and the employee benefits includes both certificated and classified, supply expenditures and purchase services, so you can see those changes. Let's go on to the next page, please, which is our month-end balances. So on this one, that solid blue line is, that is our month-end balance. And you can see, if you look for September, look straight up above that, our September month-end balance was $3,380,000. And on the far right, all the way over above August, you can see what our budgeted expected year-end balance to be, $3,244,558. So we're coming in right now a little bit above that. You can compare and see those differences between prior years. That bottom one was prior year 3. The red one just above the solid blue line is last year. And the one on top is prior year 2. You can see they kind of follow the same kind of flow. And a lot of that has to do with the apportionment I mentioned, that it's distributed across the year in different percentages. So we get 9% of our apportionment in September. But you see where there's a dip in November? That's because in November we're getting 5% of our apportionment. You can see, that increases to 9%, 8.5% in January, 9% February, and so on. But then when you get to May and June, you see that big dip there too, because the apportionment at that time of year is 5 and 6%. And then you see that increase at the end of the year because it's 12.5% in July and 10% in August. So that's why you see those changes. It's not straight across like flat. So it has a lot to do with how it's distributed.
Why do they do it that way? Why don't they just
Because
pick
they're
a-
mean.
It's beneficial to the accounting process at OSPI and at the state
Interesting.
to
Not to us.
not to give us our money evenly throughout the year. And when they give us more of it during the summer, they're able to use that money until that point in time when they have to give it to us to complete the year.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about participating in the Forecast 5 trainings, because, one of the tool is useful for looking at your, apportionment projections and your budgetary needs across the year and being strategic with it. And so I'm just starting out and learning how to use this tool, but I've heard really great things about it. Ashley Supre, and Ashley Murphy is her name now, had introduced it to the school district, and she found it to be very useful, and she continues to support the notion that it's a really great tool that I should really become good at using. So,
and really, just a little bit more, Dan, Arla, several years ago, the apportionment was distributed evenly across the months, but we had a hit here and there where they would say, they, being OSPI, would say, oh, we're going to hold your payment for transportation this month and not give it in May and not give you it until July. Or we would do that with some individual things. And then they came out with this new schedule that distributes how that apportionment goes out across the year. And some of it, like they're trying to balance, they see that in November most districts collect a levy. So, and that's when you have your biggest levy collection of tax dollars, or your second biggest one, so that they give you less apportionment then because they figure you'll have some other money to balance it out. And the same thing in April. It's
But it's essentially their, I don't know if
it's
bad,
a way
but
for
they're
them to
budgeting
manage the state, the money at the state level, and create benefit there. Yeah. And hopefully not to do harm to districts.
yeah. But that, it shows that, really it requires some real strategizing.
Yeah,
So,
that's confusing.
so that we can, make sure that we're staying in good standing.
Yeah, and at least now we're aware of it. The first year we made that jump a few years ago, we didn't know about it until it started happening. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Going on to the final page here, which is a summary, you can see last year's revenues and expenditures compared to this year's. And on the right side, you can see the current year-to-date compared to our annual budget, what we budgeted for. As the year continues, we have more data to make these comparisons. But just wanted to point out there that if you look at year-to-date percent, for last year, this time of year, we had, we're at 6.35% of our revenues received, and year-to-date this year, 6.63. So the years are pretty similar in comparison in terms of our revenues that we're collecting. Same thing goes with our expenditures, how we're spending. So that's, it's good to make those comparisons to see where we are. Our current year-to-date local taxes, again, you can see here the 49,663, which I showed you before, but you can see here how it's compared to the annual budget. So we budgeted for 3.8 million, right? So our year-to-date percentage of our levy revenues is just 1.3%. So, and I think that has to do with the way people pay their property taxes. It doesn't all come in the same amount every month. And so those changes across the year also affect our our revenues. So you can see our total expenditures and revenue percentages here, and our net change in fund balance is also presented there. And you can see there is a change, a negative change in our fund balance. And that is something that we're looking at, and I'm working closely with the superintendent on that. And again, I just want to say that these are soft numbers based on, we haven't closed last year completely out yet. Our enrollment and apportionment hasn't been, true to where we actually are. So, and we'll be watching that, and we hope to see some adjustments to that, because really we're close to being at that 8%. We're very close where we want to be, and we think we can make the adjustments as we continue through the year to keep us there.
I had a question from earlier about, what did I write? For the basic ed expenditure, why did we spend less than what was projected? The 7.41 versus the 9.78 projected? Or do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I'd have to print some reports and drill down. And it could be that as the budget was made, it might have been put more at the beginning of the year, thinking we're going to need stuff up front, and we didn't spend as much.
Also, there are with the teacher group, there are adjustments to salaries that happen in September or in September and October, because that's when they are required to turn in the number of additional clock hours they earn that would move them on the salary schedule. And so we might have budgeted for a standard. We know that we're going to jump this much, but the original contracts they had in September don't reflect that until they turn in that paperwork, and then that gets adjusted.
I'm familiar with this.
You know that.
Yeah.
Got it. That's interesting. Thank you.
It'll be a part of it. It's not the whole thing.
Sure.
I think it's really hard to kind of really make some conjectures or conclusions based on just 1 month. So I think once we have 2 or 3 months here on the dashboard, we're going to be able to have a better picture.
Definitely.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Dan.
Nice job, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we had such an outstanding report from my teaching and learning team that was my teaching and learning update.
That was a great report.
It was a great report, and I do want to bring the board up to date. I've been working with our council, Denise Stiffarm, and with interested parties regarding the potential disposition of the Feller wetlands. And at this point in time, the attorneys have completed the things that they need to do to get the proposal and everything ready to go, to get any obstacles that are legal in the way of title issues and things like that cleared up, so that we are ready to bring it to the board for discussion. We'd like to schedule a public meeting for people to have one more opportunity to say what they would like to say about the proposal. We will also have Denise Stiffarm, our attorney, present either in person or via Zoom at that time to explain everything to the board and to all of us. And then we can follow that public meeting with a resolution vote either during a board meeting immediately, on the same night, a special board meeting, or during the next scheduled board meeting. So that's where we are. There is some further conversation with the Skokomish people, and we will make sure that they know that the board is going to have that conversation. Our most recent conversation with them is there's some things they're still looking at and talking about, and they weren't, but they were going to get back to us. So once I know that we are scheduling something, then I will be in contact with the board chair, at the Skokomish tribe, to make sure that they know where that is going, so that they can be a part of and bring whatever thoughts they want to bring to that discussion as well.
And since that's an action for us to come up with that.
Yeah, and I think Jackie kind of looked at the calendar and came up with a proposed date, Jackie?
Oh my God.
So
Which
I
is
have
the
a-
Tuesday right before Thanksgiving.
I wanted to understand, and that's like right after we get back from Wausau.
Yeah, or we could do the following one, the 29th.
I want to kind of get it clear in my head what we're saying though. So when we, the board, hear from Denise, we're saying that will be the same time as like a public hearing, like a public.
It would be it could be two meetings on the same night. We could have a public hearing and then have a special board meeting to do a vote just on that. Or we could have a public meeting and do a vote during the board meeting.
The board would hear about it at the same time as, I mean, all of our meetings are public meetings.
Well,
but-
she's working on getting everything together so you have it all to look at long before then, or as soon as we can. And I did share the draft with you previously, and
Sure.
and the only thing that has been up in the air is as they pursued looking at moving forward with that draft as the agreement, we found out that decades ago, when there was the transfer through the trust to the trust of the Theller property, one of the parcels, the paperwork was not done correctly, so or at least it wasn't recorded correctly and had a physical presence down in the county. So they had to do some research and figure out how to find a paper trail and get that corrected. And so they've been working on that and got that completed so that we can go back to discussing that plan that you had to look at a
So
little
it's
bit
ready.
earlier.
It's
Mhm.
ready and done. So we're looking at either the 22nd or the 29th for a meeting, and we're gonna do it as a special board meeting so that we can make a decision, because if we had like a study session, you can't make decisions.
Well, what we
Those
would do
type
is we would start with a public meeting, and then we would adjourn to a special board meeting, and people are still welcome to be there during a special board meeting. It's not a secret meeting. But in a public session, it's easier for them to be able to comment.
So like a public hearing. Where
Yeah,
people
so we'd
could
come to
sign
the
up.
board meeting, and if we decide we need to use a bigger space, we will use a bigger space. And we would come to the meeting, we'd open the meeting, we'd do the flag salute, and then Leanna would adjourn to a public hearing.
Do you think Denise, our lawyer, would make a presentation though before
Yeah,
that?
she could
Okay.
do, yeah.
I feel like that makes sense
Mhm.
for people to, maybe that would stave off some questions if
Mhm.
they had a presentation.
Yeah, because I
before.
think one of the things that was really clear when we saw that initial draft was that there is a clause that if that transfer happens and the other entity does not follow through on the expectations that we have been working under, that what Mr. and Mrs. Theller wanted that land to be for the community, that it reverts to the school district. There is that reverting clause in there.
Yeah, I don't have a preference for either of those dates. I feel as though it would be nice and tidy to have it all in one. I worry that the public would perceive it, even though we've been working on this
Since
for
2016.
years, could perceive it as rushed if there was a public hearing and then we just made a decision right then and there.
Well,
wonder-
so we could also pick one of those nights to do a public hearing and then put the resolution on the December board agenda.
That's probably a better idea.
That's, I think, a good idea.
Okay.
So, anybody want to make a suggestion?
I
as-
prefer the 29th.
As do I.
Okay.
And we'll do it at 6:30, just like a regular, or do we want to do
Mm-hmm. And-
it a little earlier?
Well, we
to-
want our public to be able to attend.
Okay.
6:30.
So I think 6:30 is
Public
good because
hearing.
it's a public hearing and people are coming from wherever they're coming from.
Yeah.
And, I'm also cognizant of, in our weather report from NOAA, that weekend prior to that could be pretty messy with rain and flooding in our region. So I want to make sure that everything's okay for people to get wherever they need to get. We don't want anybody to feel like they didn't get to be here. And I think we'll, yes, Jackie?
I just want to make sure Deidre is available to.
On the 29th?
Are you?
I'll do something random.
Thank you. And then we'll begin with saying we're going to have it in the boardroom, but we'll be watching and ready to have that meeting take place. We'll be able to tell by response in social media and stuff too. So if we need to move it to the Commons or something, we will do that.
It might be a good idea to have a Zoom option. I mean, for people to, I don't know, Zoom in their comments if they can't make it. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
I can send something out that if they have comments and can't make it, they can email me and I can read them, or you guys can read them during it, and we can have it live videoed with Deidre.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but if they do that and we don't do it on the same night, then you have time to read any written comments that we received as well before you make your decisions, so. Okay,
Okay.
thank you for making those decisions.
Yeah, make a decision on the time.
6:30.
6:30.
6:30 p.m. on the 29th. When-
So I will contact Chairman Strong in the morning then.
Okay, and upcoming board letter columnists, October, Laura, and then Arla, and then Eric, and then John, and then myself. And then we are down to the legislative representative report. Do you have anything?
Wow, I didn't even realize that was on there. Thank you. We had General Assembly at the end of last month, and I communicated a bit with John. There were some technical glitches, but they sorted it all out for us, and he diligently attended from like 8 a.m. to 3:30 that first day, and I hopped on for the last hour and a half on that Friday, and then the rest of the time on Saturday. And it was fascinating. I mean, just so well organized the way they're able to conduct this assembly virtually. I was really just impressed with the technology of it, where everybody's Zoom turns on when it's time to vote and then goes away when it's not time to vote, but you could like green
That's
card, red
nice.
card. It was really technologically savvy. And there were a lot of interesting issues that came up, and it was just fascinating. We have WASDA, the conference coming up, and I would encourage everybody to take a look at the materials and the agenda. I don't know if it's all out yet, but to make sure you have a sense of what you want to attend, if you're attending any pre-conferences, any of the onboard trainings that are required. Start to get the lay of the land for what you want to do that weekend at the conference and what you want to get out of it. It's a good time.
Related to legislative, I would like to share, I think last month I told you about the communication we got from Department of Natural Resources about using the state forest trust lands for a carbon tax credit sales instead. So I did communicate on behalf of the district during the open public, taking testimony. And the response that I got was that I will be receiving an invitation to talk to them in person about our concerns as school districts. So I will keep you informed.
Nice.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah. That, the General Assembly, when they did that the very first time, was slammed right in because of COVID, and they did a really good job with that, so I can only imagine how much better they did.
So
But I bet
impressive.
it was really good done, so that's really cool. Okay, and we're down to the monitoring report of ER6 for the facilities. Let's see, and I'll entertain a motion to approve, monitor report, and, entertain a motion to find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER6.
So moved.
Okay, any discussion?
I think your monitoring report, and I'm sure Joan probably was a big part of this as well, is very complete, and I'm glad that we keep talking about a 20-year plan. The long-range plan for new facilities and modernizing current properties, because it's just going to be right around the corner before we know it. Really important to, like you say, establish a community committee that will be involved in those discussions as well. So good job. One more time, good job.
Thank you.
All right, so, any other discussion? Okay, and all for it signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye as well, and all opposed, not hearing any, that passes. And then down to the policy review of ER13 and ER7 that we already did last time, but if there was any discussion on that?
I have none.
No.
Okay, I don't have any. Okay, and down to the adjournment phase here. Go to the order, board and superintendent, anybody?
We won our homecoming game. That was so good.
I know,
cool.
it was a relief.
Just doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. We almost had to cancel it due to the smoke. And then
wow.
the students were ready to protest if we canceled it.
Well, it would have been a legal requirement, so it wouldn't have mattered what they
Yeah,
said.
I know. That's what we told them, but it would make them feel better.
Yeah.
I was actually at the school when that was going down, and so I was with someone who was on court, and she was like, "I'm really going to talk to him." And I was like, "We can't do anything. It's the air. They're not going to just pull it out of the
We can't fix the air.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I didn't realize there was that threat.
Well, yeah, we actually looked at a couple of alternatives. The two alternatives that were being considered, the first one I didn't like because it kind of ruins the whole concept of homecoming, was to move the game to Squim because they did not have an air quality issue and have it on the same night. The other option, which would have been frustrating for some students and maybe not a big deal for others, would have been to move it to Saturday.
Oh,
So prior to the dance.
but then it would have been
In the afternoon or whatever, but that wouldn't have worked as anyway because the air was actually worse on Saturday. So we were able to squeak by last week. We had some sporting activities though that were planned out for outdoors tonight at both the middle and the high school that had to be moved to different dates because we are actually in the unhealthy level of air right now. The good news is the projection from the EPA is that we drop all the way down to almost zero particulates by tomorrow evening.
Yeah,
so that's
that'll
good.
be so
rain
nice.
tonight, hopefully.
All of us, I'm sure that feel it and not normally feel it, will love that. My good of the order is, I could have said this in the beginning, but we are excusing John from the meeting today, and we are all thinking of him. And then I just ask that you excuse me next month at our Tuesday meeting, because I will be leaving early to stay with family for a day. I get to see my grandma before she moves on to the next the next phase. So. So that is my only.
So we'll see you at WASDA.
Huh?
So we'll see you at WASDA at the conference.
Yes, I will be leaving from their house in Clarkston 2 hours prior in the morning to be able to be there, I think, by 8 o'clock. So I think I have to leave at 6 or 5 from there.
Well, I'd like to comment on the student forum at the high school that I attended, as well as Leanna and our superintendent, and it was very good. They had an agenda on the board, so they were organized in that respect. I think Morgan was a part of that, and Sarah Pruitt.
Yes.
This was her project this year, her assignment. Lots of good questions that our superintendent was able to respond to, and I think for the most part the students were good with those responses, maybe not always happy, but good. But then we had a really good discussion about what a student needs to have under their belt when they graduate from North Mason High School. And I thought that was really, it was very revealing to me. And I felt like, because my mind always goes to academics more than soft skills for the most part. But they were looking at things like, we need to know how to take care of ourselves when we get out of here. We need to know how to do our taxes, all of those things that just are part of our lives as adults. They were interested in getting some of those life skills classes as well. So I thought it was a good discussion. What did you think, Morgan?
Yeah, it was a great discussion. I'm hoping there will be more kids next time.
Yeah.
We invited about 25 kids, only 8 showed up.
Oh, that's a small group.
But we still got a lot out of them. So we're going to, next month, I don't know when exactly it is, but what we'll do is we'll put together some questions again, and then which one of you two, whoever goes, you'll be able to ask questions or whatever too. So hopefully,
It's actually
there'll be
on the
more kids.
15th next
So on the
month. It's
15th.
scheduled. Yeah.
Okay.
Scheduled out.
Yeah, it was already scheduled for the 15th. So
We might need to move it to the end of the month, Morgan.
Yeah, I'll talk to Sarah about rescheduling that to the end of the month because I wasn't a part of the scheduling. I just asked her to do the scheduling. So we'll get that moved to the week after and let you guys
I would
know.
encourage you, as you're inviting students to participate, to let them know that really what we're looking for is what do they want to be able to know and do when they graduate from North Mason High School.
Because we're going to keep asking that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this group the same as the Kelly Reichstein, like what we did last year?
Not entirely. So last year, due to COVID, it was leadership, ASB, and
was
then
like a class.
and then honor society students. But now we've moved it back to during the school day. So we
I
are
see.
pulling kids from,
Other class.
as long as they don't have anything, if they're doing an elective or they're not doing anything in their class that day, we will pull them. And that way we get all students.
Lots of different
And
perspectives.
yeah, it's not just the leadership and honor society kids. We'll go around and we'll pull kids from different classrooms, from different grade levels.
That's insightful.
To make sure we
Thank you.
get everyone
Yeah,
different-
the
and
best
if
we
they
can.
know what we're looking for, maybe that will help them
Yeah.
kind of form some thoughts and comments too.
Yeah, I'll talk to Sarah about that, and we'll at our ASB meetings and some of our other meetings, we'll start putting together something centered around that for you guys.
Yeah.
One of the things that I mentioned was confidence, and what I also want to know from a student is if you don't know what you need, like that's okay, because when I was 5 years ago and in my business, I didn't even know what I needed now. So what would also give them the confidence to be able to go out there and not know anything, like is there something outside the box that's not just taxes and all these things that they've heard that they need, because they've never done these things hands-on as an adult. So what is where the resources and whatnot, but I feel like there's something outside the box that we're not talking about, or that we're not.
I think one of the things that we'll do is we'll craft more questions for the students based on some of the work that the State Board of Ed did on their profile of a graduate, and some of the ideas they got from people like business leaders, and ask students, what do you think about this? How important is this? Because, like you said, they might not be able to generate that idea in their head, but they can certainly respond to communication skills and what those mean. And also, as our first thought exchange is ready to go out to all stakeholders. It will go out next week during conference week. Amanda left, but she made me do a video to introduce it, so it's going to have a video at the beginning of it. And, you know, and we're hoping with those first set of questions that we generated when we were talking last week at our study session, that we'll have some idea about other things we want to ask. Some that'll help us narrow down and have some bullet points to focus on. And I think that'll help us in our conversations with the kids too.
Yeah. I would like to, one thing I was thinking about afterwards is I would like to see a focused resource for these students before they leave. We can give them the general, this is what you're going to need when you leave, but we've got, say, 5 students that are leaving and they're all going into a different field, that they be able to reach out to the to a specific resource. Like this person's going into welding. Well, hey, maybe we've got like the people that they can call and talk to and reach out to those.
And we kind of do, because that's what's happening with our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce on the reality fair and the you know, job fair, hiring fair, is they're bringing all those community folks in to talk to our kids.
That's really
and
cool.
to give them the opportunity. And
that's
so
really exciting.
And that's available to a much broader group of kids. So that's a really positive partnership.
And they're seeing it more obviously than I'm not hands-on right there with them. So that's really cool that they're going to be able to get themselves around that. So. Okay, so we are now past the good of the order, and thank you for all of that. And on to Director Bode for your...
Okay, board self-assessment, our general meeting behavior. We rate it typically satisfactory or not satisfactory, and I feel like all of those items categorized under general meeting behavior. I don't know.
Can you pull that up, Jackie?
I feel like we met all of those in a satisfactory manner. And the governance principles review, the board actions occur at the policy level rather than at the operational level. Board reviews policy about each topic before discussing that issue. We didn't really review the policy about each topic, but I think that is kind of ingrained in how we make our decisions, is whether or not it follows policy governance as well. We didn't write any additional policies tonight, but we did minimize our time spent monitoring past performance. And we routinely dedicate time to reviewing, improving our own process. And we clarify priorities and values when considering potential outcomes, beneficiaries, and costs of outcomes. The board follows an annual calendar based on a plan for doing its work. And the board chair helps the board efficiently conduct its meeting. Thank you, Leanna. And the board spends most of its time deliberating issues, defining and clarifying its vision, and linking with its community as opposed to fixing things. We support the superintendent in any reasonable interpretation of its policy, and for all of those, I said yes. Our overall performance is satisfactory.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. And we have a note here for our next board meeting date due to the board members attending the WASDA conference in Spokane. The next school board meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 15th at 6:30 right here in the board room. And Arla will be running that.
Sure.
And then that will leave 4 of you, but if someone is out, then that will that leave?
We'll still have a quorum with 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be good. Well, unless something else happens, then what if something did happen? What would
Then we wouldn't hold the meeting, we'd reschedule.
Just reschedule. Okay. Okay. Well, that is it, and then we are out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.